I could not put this book down. I literally read it in 3 sittings. It's such a good book. And I was sad when it was finished. So I love this book. But let me start off with the things I didn't like. Very few things, but there were some. First of all, let's start with the cover. This picture right here where you're cheering, Jonathan, it looks like you have no neck. So you should have chose a different picture or a different shirt because it looks like you have no neck. And then the heel you're wearing here, there's like this white spot. I don't know if that's just like how the heel was or that was just bad photoshopping skills. This other thing I didn't like was that there was no center pages with pictures. I wanted to see pictures from your childhood, your mom, your brothers, some of the people in here, which I guess I understand why you wouldn't want pictures of those, but there were other pictures that you could have included. So I was really mad about that. So when I got to your little middle section about Clinton, your little school project, I was so mad that there weren't pictures, so I didn't even read it. I just skipped through it. But other than that, I loved it. And it's the signed copy. And it comes with a certificate of authentication to make sure it's a real signature. I'm going to read you some of the things some things I highlighted because they resonated with me. The first one was this one that says, "My personality is a minivan, actually a small bus. There are different pieces of me that are all driving together with one in charge based on what's happening in my life." And I can relate to that. I feel like my personality is the same way. There's just... sometimes you're going to get a different version of me. You might like one, you might not like the other. For me, a young queer kid in Illinois in the early 90s, my mom was my confidence and my safety blanket. That's so important that to have the support of your mom and your family. Most of us don't. The fact that his mom was very accepting from the beginning is just like, kudos to his mom. I would take my hat off for her, but I don't want to mess up the look. He did a lot of like pretend figure skating in his living room, which there are a lot of references to figure skating, none of which I understood because I don't follow that. And there are a lot of pop culture references that if you're not familiar, you're not gonna get, and that happened to me too. One I did get, and it says, "My routine was 3 minutes and 42 seconds, the exact length of one sweet day." And I remember listening to that song over and over. We weren't allowed to listen to secular music, so I would go into my dad's pickup truck and just turn on the radio, and that song would come on back then, and I would just listen to it and sing it off of the top of my lungs, off key and off note, but in my head it was a perfect rendition. So he also talks about his stepdad, Steve. "Steve showed me how to be confident and proud in my body no matter my size. He believed that other people's opinions are not a reflection of you, as long as your spirit is thriving." And that is so beautiful. I think everybody should be comfortable in their skin, and that is something that should be instilled in you as you're growing up. I just love his stepdad. He was amazing the way he helped Jonathan grow up. More parents should be like him. "The PTSD that occurs from the abuse is even more unfair. In addition to the host of behaviors we incur that stem from the abuse." So one thing that is very real is PTSD, growing up and having to like hide that and grow up in a home that doesn't accept or is willing to acknowledge that. Well, for me, you end up always monitoring your behavior. You're always in your head about what not to do, what not to do. So don't cross your arms like that, so you don't do it like that, you don't hold your glass like this. So you're always correcting your movements and thinking about that, and that is a major emotional mental strain. So PTSD is a real thing in the community, and it's something that's not talked about. I read a really good article that really went into the emphasis of PTSD and how that affects our brain. Instead, I escaped into fantasy, usually while listening to Christina Aguilera's Strip album. And Christina Aguilera's Strip album was a iconic album for me, and Strip came out, it was in 2001. I was already outside of high school, but that album, oof, it was in repeat. Walk Away, one of my favorite songs. Good choice of album to listen to, Jonathan. He also references the book The 5 Love Languages, and it's a book that I've read, and even when I was a teacher I read The 5 Love Languages of Children, so it's something that you should read. It's a good read and a great book, and it really shows you how people's love language is different than your own, and you kind of have to acknowledge what theirs is in order to make it a successful relationship. Recovery for me has not been linear. It's more 2 steps forward, 3 back, 5 forward, 2 back. So I'm always improving, but there are step backs within the improvement, and I really relate to that. I feel my growth is very much a positive trend, but there are dips, where I take several steps back, but it is a positive trend. Kind of like this graph right here. Healing can be imperfect. There's a lot of wisdom in this book. So this is after he finds out about his diagnosis, which all the headlines were the devastating diagnosis of Jonathan Van Ness. I'm like, why are they putting that word devastating? He even talked about it. But I guess it's clickbait, so you can read or listen or whatever, but it creates negative connotation to that and a negative stigma that needs to stop. That day was just as devastating as you would think it would be, but at the same time I had this sense of relief that the lifelong fear I had since I was a 6-year-old boy was finally over. The monster under the bed that had been chasing me for so long, that I had been so desperate to avoid, had finally caught me. And that's something that I think about too, and it's always in the back of my head, and it's there, and it doesn't allow me to live like a ease life, because that thought is always lurking, you know. I had been stunned by the content creation bee. She's an elusive little creature. Her sting is highly addictive. Her symptoms include a constant need for creative expression, an incessant thirst for validation, and a sense of having something to say but not knowing quite how to say it. And I can relate that to so much, you know, just being an artist and painting and even being a content creator on YouTube. It's very addicting. So I totally get it, Jonathan. The book also talked about the audition process of Queer Eye, and I was so hooked on that part because I really wanted to know. Karamo also touched it, and those were parts in his book that I was really drawn to, and this one too, and it's very interesting how that whole process is. Being an adult wasn't about being normal or having a life that seems inviolable to people from the outside. Being fulfilled and successful adult has required accepting that I do have an inner child who was hurt and traumatized. My job as an adult to nurture him alongside all the other parts of me that make me who I am. I needed to hear that. So overall, this book is very inspiring. It's very touching. There's a lot in here that I wasn't expecting to read. At moments, it is a hard read, but it's very real, very raw. It gives you a side of Jonathan that I didn't know was there, so it makes him that much more human. So if you haven't read this book, I recommend you read it ASAP, order it. It's so good. I don't want to give you too much or spoil too much about what's in here, but it's such a gem. I think if anyone who is LGBT and still hasn't come to terms with it, or is a young adolescent boy or girl or what have you, it's like a beacon of light, and it's going to inspire you, and a lot of knowledge that needs to be heard or read. I don't know, it's a very inspiring book. I loved it. I loved the show. I love one of my favorite books this year. I also read Karamo's book, so I will link the review of that one so you can watch it as well. Bobby, when I buy a house, I will purchase all your furniture for the house. And then to entertain people, Anthony, I will buy your cookbook when they come over and make your recipes. And Tan, your book is next. So anyway, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. Tell me what you thought about the book if you've read it. And if you haven't read it, hurry to your nearest bookstore, Amazon, online, and order it. It's a great read, and I think you will thoroughly enjoy it like I did. That's it. Adios y bye.